Hi, my name is Ron. I'm with Mobile Fix Automotive. I'm the owner, and today I'm going to walk you through the process of fixing the damaged threads in the actual block, the engine block on a 2003 Honda Accord. This engine's a V6. This is a 12 millimeter by 1.50 thread pitch for the head bolt, and this job was originally quoted as a head gasket, and unfortunately sometimes mechanics are a lot like doctors in the fact that we don't know what's actually going on inside until we actually take stuff apart. Unfortunately, even though technically the head gasket blew, it didn't really blow. What happened is the cylinder head was no longer tight to the block, and it allowed oil and coolant to kind of spray everywhere and mix inside the engine. There was oil in the radiator, there was an oil leak on the outside of the engine, and it was pretty ugly. I've already disassembled this. We're not going to be dealing with the tear down of the engine or putting the engine back together. This is just strictly going to be on the Timesert kit and how to use it, so that for those of you that have had this issue, you can fix it. It's not, you don't have to throw the engine away. There is Timesert does make a kit to be able to fix this problem. And it can be done in the car. You just have to have a little bit of safety guidelines, a little bit of common sense when it comes to where shavings can go and all that stuff. So keep that in mind. Couple of disclaimers. One of them on this engine is I already have the head off, which means the timing belt is off the engine. This engine, unlike the Toyotas, is an interference engine. So if you rotate the crankshaft or the camshaft independent of each other too far, you can bend a valve and that will lose compression. So be very careful when you're doing this, and make sure you read your books thoroughly on how to actually tear down and put back together. So I'm gonna go ahead and have the cameraman come over here. So when I pulled the cylinder head off, what no mechanic, whether you're professional or a beginner, ever wants to see, this is a cylinder head bolt, is this right here, that silver look to the threads. So go ahead and pull back. I'm gonna let you stay close on here. So this is the cylinder head bolt on this 3.0 Honda, and the reason why the head gasket was leaking was because the head was no longer being pulled down to the block. Basically, this bolt takes the cylinder head and the block and it pulls it together, and that keeps the gasket compressed and it does all of its stuff. So if you're not familiar with what happens when threads get pulled out of an engine block, this silver that you see is actually the aluminum from the inside of the engine. And when this engine overheated, it got so hot, it literally pulled the threads right out of the block. So what I'm doing right now is unscrewing this. This is not a helicoil. For those of you that go, oh, that's a helicoil. This is actually the aluminum threads that pulled out. Now you can see the thread on the cylinder head is okay. Oh, be careful, cameraman. Okay, so these bolts are called torque to yield. And the difference between these bolts now and when I grew up, and the guys that remember the engines from when I grew up, we'll throw that on the table, is that when these bolts tighten down, instead of just torquing them to, say, a specified number like 65 or 75 foot-pounds, and then having to warm the engine up and then go back, pull the valve covers, and in some cases the camshafts to re-torque them, what the manufacturers came up with was a specific type of metal that literally stretches. Now, here at my shop, I want to do things so that the cars don't come back. So typically when I do a cylinder head gasket job on or pull a cylinder head off of an engine that has torque to yields, I will automatically put brand new ones in. However, in the Mitchell on-demand book, it does say that if you measure the threads, there's a specific measurement for it, you can reuse the Honda bolts, although I strongly recommend that at $30 a set for head bolts, just buy new ones and not worry about having to pull the threads out because you're over tightening them and all this other stuff. So basically there are threads, come on back over here, Mr. Cameraman. There are threads that are down inside this hole in the engine block, and they are gone. Now, some shops will tell you your engine's trash, you got to get rid of it. That is not true. I'm going to show you in a second here on the table all the stuff that you'll need for the most part to be able to fix this and fix it permanently, and you'll be fine. So when I took the head off, like I said, we'll recap, pulled the bolt out. The bolt was not tight. That's one of the things on your Honda when you go to check for a head gasket blown, before you just take the bolts out with an impact wrench or by hand or however you're doing it, always try to tighten them first. Because if they start to spin like they weren't tight, pretty good chance the threads are trash in the block. Because at some point they probably were tight, unless a mechanic missed a step, and that's not that it can't happen, but it's rare. So let's go ahead and end step one of the introduction, and let me switch over and show you what we need to do to fix this. Real quick, I want to share something with you about the bolt that pulled the threads out. You get a close-up on this, okay, you can see fresh threads right here that never got used because the head bolt doesn't go in that far. And this silver, once again, like I said, is actually the manufactured cylinder head. And it literally, when the engine overheated, just pulled the bolt and the threads right out. What I'm doing is I'm holding it and I'm unscrewing it. Now here's what's really cool. This thing looks like a slinky, or what some people will refer to as a helicoil, but it's not. This is actually the aluminum in the engine. This is part of the block. It's not supposed to look like this. And there's the threads when they're not messed up. Okay, another quick update about the head bolt itself that's very important for you to understand. This particular head bolt is referred to as a torque to yield bolt. And what that means is that this bolt is a specially designed steel that is designed to stretch when you tighten it down. As a result of that, for different people have different, whether or not we demand replacing them, some of them are recommended replacement. Basically, where my thought is, 35 years plus of turning wrenches, Honda says that you can reuse this bolt as long as your threads measure a specific measurement. You can look that up online. For me, anytime I pull a torque to yield bolt, I change it. Head bolts are $20 to $30 a set. And for the amount of time and labor that it takes to do these jobs, and the fact that if you reuse one of these bolts, it could possibly pull the threads. So it's up to you, but on the Honda, it's saying you can reuse them if it's within measurement. I'm actually gonna put new ones on. Please keep that in the back of your mind when you're doing your head gasket job, because these bolts are not like the old school bolts where we used to torque them to 65 or 75 foot-pounds, whatever the numbers were, and then you'd warm the engine up, and then you'd shut the engine back off and pull the valve cover and go back in and have to retorque the head bolts again. That was the old way of doing it. The torque to yield bolt constantly pulls on the cylinder head because it's stretched, and as long as it doesn't fatigue, then it'll constantly pull down on the cylinder head. You don't have to go back in and retorque it. So that's what these bolts are for. So didn't know whether or not you're interested in that bit of information, but that's what the torque to yield bolts are all about. Okay, welcome to the intro of the tools that we're going to be using, and really quick, some of the stuff I think you really should have on hand. One of them is, number one, first and foremost, you're going to need an air blower. Don't do the shavings with a vacuum unless you think you can take care of it. You are going to need a 1/2 inch drill. You do not have to have an electric like I'm using. You can use an impact drill, well, not impact drill, but an air drill. You can use a powered cord drill. You just need to make sure that the bits fit inside the end of it. If you're going to use an electric drill, be a good idea for you to have a backup battery standing by. I am going to add, you notice I've got a DeWalt battery, but I have a Mac tool drill. for those of you that are going to want to know what the heck's going on, DeWalt makes the tools now for Mac for the electrics. So the battery pack for the XR series from, you know, Lowe's, Home Depot, they interchange with the Mac tools drill. So rather than pay the pricing, I just buy the DeWalt batteries and put them in. So really quick for that. Circular pair of pliers, they're circular needle nose. These are going to be for pulling the dowel pins out of the block to install the tooling. I use official duct tape, okay? D-U-C-K-T-A-P-E. There's a couple of different brands you can buy. This one's really thin, has a pretty good, instead of it being really thick and really tacky, it's got a medium tack to it and it's pretty thin, so it doesn't change my thickness. So I like this type of deal. You can use whatever tape you want. You just have to find something that's going to stick to the block. You'll see that here when we get into the install. I'm going to be using a razor blade X-Acto knife with a really sharp blade. Actually changed it for once, so it should work good. The kit that I'm going to be using, come on in here with me. This is a kit manufactured by Timesert, okay? And the kit number looks like it's part number 4800. And once again, I'm gonna give some kudos out to Dennis at wiseautotools.com. He's one of the suppliers. I buy a lot of stuff from him. And I really like him. His shipping is fast, so I'm gonna throw a plug in there for him. So when you open up your kit, this is what you're gonna see. Now, because it came from Dennis, it's got his cool little sticker in there. I'm pretty sure for everybody he does, I know he does for me, he quality checks everything, makes sure everything's there when you need it. Cuts back on any problems or missing components. You should, at the very beginning of opening your kit, the first thing you should see is your instruction manual, which is two-sided. It's laminated, so you don't have to worry about getting water and grease on it, as it'll wipe off, and then you'll get a protective cover. I actually save and reuse this. Inside your kit, you should have a bag of inserts. They should be, for the Honda 3.0, they should be 12 millimeter by 1.50, okay? And there should be 10 of them in a bag, although the Honda 3.0 only uses 8 inserts. So keep that in the back of your mind. You will, in your kit, get the plate. This is the guide plate. This thing's critical to making sure that these holes are done straight. This particular kit number, Dennis hooked me up with. This is actually a universal kit, so it works on more than just the Honda. I'm letting you know that because if you've looked up the kit for your Honda, it's a different part number. If you buy this kit, it has everything the Honda kit has and a little bit more, so you can actually work. If you ever have to, as a mechanic, do more than one down the line, you've got some options, okay? I ordered an extra reload pack of inserts so that when I'm done with this job, I'm ready to go if a customer brings another car in. Your kit should have a Sharpie, okay? There is, in the universal pack, there is this little bag with these 2 little inserts that are guide inserts. Dowel, it says head alignment dowel special. So I'm not sure if we're going to be using those yet or not because I haven't got to the install side. I will read the instructions and see. The next step, if you want to come in here with me, is you're going to see 2 long bolts and you're going to see 2 short bolts. Those are the bolts that hold this plate down on your block. In your kit, universal or specific, you should have a guide pin setup. That's going to be to center this. We'll go over that during the install. You should get a bottle of thread locker. Okay, they use 60-20 thread locker and sealer. This is for 500-degree temperatures. If you don't have that or you've ran out, I have used in the past 671, or was it 671? I just messed that up. 271 thread locker, the red thread locker. So there's 3 more pieces, actually 4 more pieces really quick. The installer tool, so I'm going to go backwards in the way I'm showing these. If you get this kit, and you go to screw the installer into the insert, it's going to come to a stop right there. Normally we would panic and say it's cross threading and there's a thread issue. That's perfectly fine on the Timesert thread install for the blocks, and the reason why is because as this installs it, it's going to make sure this goes all the way down in and seats, and it'll, to me, I think it spreads it out just a little bit. And because of that, make sure that you use this oil on these threads each and every insert that you put in. I made the mistake on my kit for doing the Toyota Camry, which is an 11mm kit, so it's a little bit smaller than this. I made the mistake of not oiling all the inserts, and I actually ended up breaking the tip of this tool because it overheated. So that oil is critical on these. The next thing that's in the kit is your core drill. Okay? The reason why this core drill looks kind of funny is because this side of the drill does not get used at all. Okay? Only from this step down, which is basically where your bit is. That's the only thing that you're going to use. And okay, a little glitch in the video because there was a truck backing up. I was afraid you guys couldn't hear over it. So what I was getting at is that this is the only part of the reamer that you're going to be using when it goes in. Now, this little, you should have one of these. It has an 1/8 inch set screw in it for 1/8 inch Allen wrench. This is actually going to go on here. We're going to do a precise measurement on the engine block, and then we're going to be tightening that down, and that sets our pre-depth on how far we can go into the engine. Stay with me. There's one hole on the Honda 3.0 that is a different depth than the other 7 holes. If you drill them all the same, you're going to potentially damage your engine. So make sure to follow what I'm doing when we get to the car, please. Okay, then one more piece, actually 2 more pieces we're going to do here real quick. This is the tap. Okay, this is what's going to put the threads in the block after we ream it out. And then one of the most important tools that should be in your kit, and hopefully is, because without it, it's going to be really difficult to use. This is an actual depth finder. Okay, and it is measured. If you look on it really closely, I don't know if you can zoom in far enough, it's probably out of focus, but it has both millimeters and inches on it, so you can use either way you feel comfortable with. Okay, just making sure I got all my ducks in a row real quick. So that's pretty much the tooling you're going to need, and we're going to go ahead and move over to the car here in just a second, and we're going to start going through the install process on how to fix these threads so that this vehicle will be back up and running. Okay, are we ready to get started? Let's go ahead and start prepping this thing for the repair. There's some people outside moving some bins around, so if you hear some noise in the background, please be patient. Also, there's a fan being blown on us, so if you hear a lot of noise in the background, sounds like air, that's the fan. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to prep this so we don't get any debris down inside the engine. The critical things that you need to know about is that these 4 ports right here are oil ports. We're not going to be drilling in those. Please don't send your drill bits down in there. You don't need to. This is an oil port. This is an oil port. We're going to make sure we don't get any debris down in there. The only 8 holes we're going to be dealing with are the ones that you took your cylinder head bolts out of. Okay, now I made reference to the fact that one of these bolts is different than the others. This hole right here, which ironically is the one that pulled the threads, the threads are not deep enough in the block the way the other 7 are. They're not as deep. So if you drill that hole the same as all the others, it's not going to end well. So there's a potential for catastrophic engine damage at that point. And let me show you why they did that. So the head bolts are all the same length. When you buy the head bolt kit for the 3.0 Honda, at least for this model year in 2003, your head bolts are all the same length. These shoulders right here, come on in and look. These are the shoulders where the head bolts go. There are 8 of them. They match the same as the block. This shoulder right here, which is that hole that I just pointed to, If you can tell the difference between the two, it's about a ½ an inch higher up than these other 7. Because of that, where all the other bolts go in the cylinder head, all the other bolts are down here. That one bolt is going to be up here in the cylinder head, if that makes sense to you. So if you do the core drill the same on all 8, you're going to end up going too deep in that one hole, and I don't know what's underneath there, but let's not drill into it and find out. There's a reason why they did that, and I really would rather not find out the hard way. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take my duct tape and I'm going to take my X-Acto knife, and we're going to do one thing real quick that I almost forgot. See this piston right here? Okay, this is the center piston on this side. This piston sticks up, the crown of this piston sticks up past the actual engine block. And what's going to happen if you don't lower that piston is this plate, which will sit flat here. See how you don't hear nothing? If you put it here, hear how it rattles around? Okay, you cannot do that and have the correct depth and back spacing on the holes. So this is going to get really critical, and you need to pay attention, please. This is an interference engine. That means that the valves and the pistons both occupy the same space in the engine, but at different times. That's what the timing belt is for, to keep all that in time. I need to rotate the crankshaft on this engine 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn to drop that piston down just enough so that this will sit on the block flush. If I overturn that crank too far and I'm not paying attention, I could very easily bend valves in the rear cylinder head. So pay attention to that, please. Look in your manuals, make sure you're doing that right. But I'm going to show you how I'm going to do it, and then it's going to be up to you to get your timing marks back in sequence when you do your reassembly, because I'm not going to be going into that portion of it. All right, so I have an adjustable wrench. This is the easiest tool to use. I'm going to take it down here and I'm going to put it on the crank pulley. I've already got the front of the engine disassembled from teardown. There is a Woodruff key that is at the 12 o'clock position on this. Now, keep in mind, my timing belt is off. The rear cylinder head is still on, so that's the reason why it's critical for me to make sure not to bend a valve. Don't let this pulley rotate. Don't let it move. It should stay as long as you don't physically move it. You're gonna take and put your wrench down on here and then adjust it until you can feel it get tight. And you'll be able to move it around, but what happens is when you come around, it's gonna catch on that Woodruff key, and then you just simply slowly move it. Now go ahead and watch the piston. You're gonna see the piston drop. Okay, I'm gonna reset my wrench and move it just a little bit more. That's all I need to do right there. You see how far the piston went down? Just enough to be able to clear. Now, I did not feel any tension on this tool at all. It was nice and smooth. So that's my indicator no valve damage has been done. When this step is done, when we're done with the drilling, when I go to reassemble this engine, I have to remember to put that back at 12 o'clock because that's the timing mark, and if I leave it there, it'll be 1 tooth off, okay, or at least 1 tooth off. So I'm gonna switch sides with my camera, and this is where we're gonna go ahead and go in here. Should have had that in my hand already. I'm gonna spray just a little bit of brake cleaner on here just to get some of the oil and grease off of this surface. Now I've already kind of prepped this a little bit so that we wouldn't have to spend a ton of time on the video. Don't use a cloth that's going to drop a lot of stuff down in these holes. These blue microfiber cloths are actually really good for this. Real quick, you'll notice I've already sealed off the intake manifold, and I've already sealed off the water ports because I did not pull off the crossover from cylinder head to cylinder head. Now I like to go up and down with the tape there's no specifics. This is just the way I do it. You can go across if you feel comfortable. This piece right here, which is just an inset, and this piece right here, you can see all the junk that's down in there. They don't go into the engine, so don't worry if they don't cover those up 100%, because those shavings can be blown out with no problem. What you want to do is cover up the holes that we talked about in the last little segment. Now, if you're using good tape, it should bond really well. If your tape is not sticking to the metal, the aluminum of the block, then you need to clean the aluminum better, or you need to buy better tape. I'm going to do a couple of these strips, and right now I'm going to grab my plate. I already know that I'm good, but just to show you guys, no more wiggle. Okay, it's flat. Piston's down far enough that it's not going to interfere with that plate. So now that I've verified that, and feel free to use your fast forward and your rewind buttons. I'm trying to make this short and precise and give you all the information that I can without making it any longer than it needs to be, because I know it is going to be a longer video. Every once in a while you come up and you make a piece too short. And that's what I just did. Once again, this is so shavings do not get down into critical components on the engine. And I did another one too short. See, happens to the best of us. You'll notice there's a vacuum cleaner over my right shoulder. If I haven't mentioned that already, that is going to be for a little bit easier cleanup than the last video, hopefully. Now, if you're interested in the overlap that I'm doing, or want to know how far I'm overlapping it, I'm only overlapping it about 1/4 of an inch. There's really no need to overlap it, you know, by a long shot, because what you're just trying to do right now is keep stuff out of the engine. And if you overlap them too many times, you'll actually change your depth of your core drill, and you don't really want to do that. So what I'm going to do, the next step, now that I've got tape all the way across it, is I'm going to find the holes for the cylinder head bolts. All right. Now I do this quite often, so it's easier for me to figure out which hole's which. Remember I told you there's a hole right there for oil. You don't want to cut that one. Okay. There's your hole for your oil passage. There's that wide oil passage. You don't want to cut into those. If you do, then just simply take those pieces of tape off and redo them. It's really the easiest way to fix that. You don't have to be perfect circles on this. My blade's really sharp, so. All right, so those are those. What I do to make this easy is I do the top holes first, because it makes it easy finding the bottom holes. Once I know where the top hole is, because we already know that there's only 2 oil passages on the top. So if you get confused on how to find it, do your top holes first. pushing in with your finger really helps. That one's that little bitty oil hole, so you already know that it's not going to be the little one we're drilling. That would make pretty good sense. And if you get a piece of tape that falls down in here, I wouldn't worry too much about it because the core drill is going to get it right back out anyway. Okay, so these are the 4 head bolts on the top. Draw yourself a straight line down. Find the hole right below it, straight down. And that's going to be where I'm going to cut the hole for this. Okay, same thing with this. I'm going to take my finger, I'm going to go straight down. Bam, there's the hole. Pushing in with your finger will give you just a little bit of a detent, and you'll be able to see the hole pretty clear through the tape. Now see, on this one, if you go too far, you highlight the oil passage below it. We don't want to do that one. Okay, so now our engine block is sealed, so we shouldn't get any shavings in it. The holes are cut open. We're ready to install the tool, and we're ready to start installing the new threads into this. So at this point right now, what we're going to do is we're going to go over the setup for the tool, because this is the most critical stage of doing this. The drilling is actually easy and it's boring. Making sure you get the right depth and making sure you do the steps right for the insert, that's the critical part. So let's go ahead and take a break, and then we'll get started on the next one. Okay, I'm inserting this quick little tip because when I showed you the circular needle nose pliers, I never used them on the block and it didn't dawn on me. I'm apologizing. There are dowel pins that are in the engine block that guide the cylinder head perfectly so that it's always lined up. If they stay in the engine block, you have to remove them before you can put the tape down and use the tool. So these are what the dowel pins look like. There's 2 of them, okay? Really quick, follow me over here. They will be located in this hole and this hole, which are the 2 bottom outside holes on the engine block. The way to remove them, and this is in a perfect world because sometimes these things can be a booger to get out, but you should be able to put the circular pliers down on there, tighten it down, and you just twist it back and forth while you're pulling up and they'll pop right out. Same thing with this side here, so we'll do it twice because it's so quick, just so you can see. Okay, do not lose these. I'm going to put them right here with the head bolts so I know where they're at. I wanted to install that just because I forgot, and if they're in the cylinder, the block, when you pull the head, you're going to have to remove them to be able to do this particular part. All right, break time's over. The next step is we're going to start setting our tool up. So you should have this little measuring stick, and real quick, I'm only bringing this up because mine was disassembled in the kit when it came in. It probably fell off, but if yours comes in 2 pieces, it's not broken, take the little, it's going to look like a T almost, and it has like a little bottom like a ballpoint pen does to hold it in your pocket. Hold it like this, and then hold your stick where your measuring numbers are facing you horizontal from left to right, and just slide that in that little detent. There's 2 of them, and then that should make that slide up and down. And then come on over here, and what we're going to do is we're going to measure our critical depth to the first thread on these cylinders. And I'm going to make it real quick. I'm going to show you on this little piece of paper. This should help, hopefully. When I talk about the first thread, this is a model simulation of what the engine looks like. So you're going to run this measuring stick down inside the hole up against the wall tight until it comes to a stop on that first thread, which may or may not be messed up, but you'll still pretty much feel it with the tool. And you're going to do it multiple times to make sure you get a good, accurate measurement. But when I say first thread, I'm not talking about the one all the way at the bottom of the hole inside. I'm talking about the first thread that you come to. Hopefully that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this measuring T, the stick, I'm going to pull it down to about 1 inch from the end, and I'm going to pick a hole. I'm going to use this hole here. I'm going to put it up against this, And I'm just going to slowly push down in here without forcing it until I feel it come to a slight stop. Okay, that'll be the first thread. I'll pull it out and I'll look at my measurement. Now, this measurement right here is at 50. It's basically 51 millimeters. Okay, so I'm going to check it again, only I'm going to do it on the top side of the hole. Now all I'm doing is looking for a decent measurement. Pull it back out, basically 50 millimeters. Now the reason why you'll end up with a little bit of a difference is that threads spiral as they go down. So we're just trying to find a ballpark. If it's off by 1 millimeter, it's not going to be catastrophic, but we want to just try to be as precise as we can. So before you start drilling, my recommendation is keep doing this over and over again until you get a nice constant reading on your gauge. You can check other holes to verify. Now see, what I did was I pushed down in there and it went past the threads. And so now my tool is showing 62 millimeters, but that's not correct. So I'm going to go up against the wall, push down nice and light until I feel it come to a stop. And then we're basically at 51 millimeters, okay? 50 to 51 millimeters. Now, real quick, I'm gonna show you this hole that's different from the rest, which is this upper right-hand hole when I'm dealing with this forward bank. Now, when you're on the other side of the engine, this changes because it flips around. But we were at 51 millimeters on all the other holes. When I check this one, we are at 42 to 43 millimeters, okay? That's significant because if we drill that to 50 millimeters, it's gonna go in about 8 millimeters further than it's supposed to, and it can potentially damage whatever it's protecting on the inside of that engine. So we're at 50 to 51 millimeters. We're gonna do one of the normal holes first, and then we're gonna do that setup. So we're gonna walk over here to our tool. We're gonna set our depth back at 51 millimeters from the end to right there. And then we're gonna take this tool, which is going to be the reamer, core drill, whatever they wanna call it, and we're gonna take and put this flat T on the narrow side down here. We're just gonna run it up until it hits that, and we're going to look at where this is. Now, this collar that has to get tightened down isn't going to come down and touch that. So for those of you that want to tighten it down, don't. That's not what it's supposed to have happen. Okay? The next step from here is, if you look at your paper, this sleeve, which is the centering sleeve for the drills and the taps and everything else, this sleeve is a little over 30 millimeters in height. And so what you're going to do is you're going to take the 51 millimeters and you're going to add, according to the book, the core drill is 38 millimeters. And I'm going to verify that real quick just to make sure. 38.22 millimeters. So I need to take and do the mathematics and add 38 millimeters to the 51 millimeters that was on my tool. Okay? And I'm going to do that on a calculator so I don't get it wrong. The calculator will be my phone. So we had 51 millimeters plus 38 millimeters, correct? And that's going to come out to 89 millimeters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my slider and I'm going to move it until it says 89 millimeters, which is going to be right before 90. Okay? And then I'm going to put it back on my tool again. And I'm going to run the T up until it hits that shelf right there where it goes to the next step. I'm going to take my Sharpie, which I put in my pocket. I'm going to verify that I'm still at 89 millimeters on my tool. And I'm going to mark right at the top of this measuring stick. Okay? Now, we're gonna do some double checking. This takes a second, but you wanna make sure you don't get this step wrong. Put your stop tool and bring it down until you hit your mark. Gotta love air compressors when they kick in for no reason. Bring it down until you just see that Sharpie mark start to disappear. And then take an 1/8 inch, at least my adjuster tool is 1/8 inch, Allen wrench, and tighten that down. And then we're gonna double check again on the 89 millimeters, because sometimes this thing moves around. And if you put it on here, oh, I didn't do 89 millimeters, I did 79 millimeters. Sorry, bad eyesight. Back to 89 millimeters. It should set right down. Where our drop off is. Okay? And what that's gonna do is it's gonna make up for this little tool that's gonna set down in here, because as you drill down, you're not drilling all the way down to the block, you're gonna stop right there. And that's the reason we had to add that measurement. So if you didn't understand that, rewind it and go over it again a couple times until you make sure you got that figured out. Now, the next step on the book for these 7 holes is going to be to take the other 2 tools, and this is what I do. I just take the plate, come on in, and I put that there, and then I put that there. We're gonna do them one at a time, and I'm gonna take my Sharpie, and what we're doing is we want them to be the same height. And we're gonna draw a line on that one. And then we're gonna take the tap and we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna draw a line on that one. This is just gonna give us a ballpark depth when we go to use these 2 tools on where we're going to be. All right, the drill is the critical one. That's the reason it has the stop. Once this is done, the rest of it is all gonna fall into place. But as we start to run these down, let's just say we're using the tap. As we're tapping, when that line basically gets to the top right here, we'll know if we're all the way in. Like if your tap came to a stop right there and you had 3/4 of an inch, you're not tapped all the way down. That's what that reference line is for. So hopefully that makes sense to you. So now we're gonna set this tool up on the engine and actually do a drill. So we've double checked our depth, we've set up our tool, and now what we need is we need the plate, we need the guide, and we need the dowel alignment tool. And then on the Honda, I already know this, we're gonna use the 2 long bolts that come in the kit, not the short ones because they won't reach the threads. So stop the video and we'll switch over to the car here in just a second. All right, let's get started on this stage. The only thing I've added is I got an electric 3/8 drill that has a 13 millimeter deep socket on it, and that's gonna be to set my guide bolts or the plate bolts. You can use a hand wrench or a ratchet. That's why I didn't bring them up earlier. Whatever you need to do, but you'll understand here in just a second. So expect a couple of these holes to maybe have some messed up threads, since we already had one that was bad. But what you're gonna do is you're gonna put this plate, come on in here, and you're gonna figure out which one of these holes you wanna do. Now, you see how that's lined up there? But come down here and you see how that hole doesn't line up, that hole doesn't line up, and that hole doesn't line up? So this is on here improperly to do that particular hole. If I flip it over this way, you'll notice that we have that hole lined up, that hole lined up, that one lined up, and this one lined up. So this is the way I'm gonna flip it. I'm going to drill this hole first, because I already know by putting the bolt back in that hole and pulling it out that the threads are compromised, and I won't be able to use this hole to tighten it down. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put the the guide in the hole. It only fits in one, by the way. The slotted holes, this does not go in, okay? Don't even try to. It only goes in the big round hole. And then you're gonna take the pointed side of the guide. We see that? Okay, and you're gonna put it in here and you're gonna drop it down in that hole just like that. Now, once you do that, you're gonna take your 2 bolts and you're gonna drop them down in here. And I can already feel that I have threads that don't want to participate in this program because it doesn't want to screw in. So I'm going to verify real quick that these are the right ones. Okay, yeah, so it screws into this one here, but it doesn't want to screw into the other ones. So that's telling me that we got more than one compromised hole. So what I'm going to do real quick, is I'm going to put a little WD-40 on here. Okay, got that one in there. And then I'm gonna take and put some WD-40 on the next one. Now what I'm doing is I'm putting lubricant on the threads of the bolts so that when I push them down in here, they try not to dry, what I like to call dry bind. Yeah, like that right there. These threads right here in that hole are completely destroyed. So they're coming out. And this is not what you want to see. But this plate just needs to be bolted down so that it's flat on the block. And although ideally you want to have a bolt crisscrossed on each side, if you can just get it bolted down flat with 2 bolts, then you're fine. Usually once you get your first insert done, so if you end up with 2 holes that are damaged, just figure out how to do the plate so that you can get 2 bolts tight and then do the first hole, if you understand what I'm talking about. I know it's confusing. Now they tell you not to hammer this thing in. I actually like to tap it just to make sure before, actually I messed that step up. I'm gonna loosen these up just a little bit. I like to tap it just a little bit to make sure that thing is perfectly centered before I tighten these 2 bolts down. And you don't have to tighten them down tight, you just need to snug them up so that that plate doesn't move. Okay, this is where your drill comes in. So the one thing I didn't do on the video, so we're gonna stop real quick, is this one does not have a hex, it has a square drive. So I have to adapt it to my drill real quick. So we're gonna stop the video. I'm gonna adapt it so you don't have to watch me, and I'll be right back. All right, once again, now we're at the next step. The next step is gonna be to actually do the drilling. One more time, I'm gonna double check myself. I wanna make sure I do not mess this up. So I'm going to pull my pin out. Sometimes that pin, after you tap it, it'll be stuck. If it gets stuck, you can put a pair of pliers on it and twist it. In my case, I usually just pull the spacer out, and then that'll allow me to pull out the guide. Because this guide doesn't get used for the actual drilling. All it is to center that hole so that the drill bit goes down in there nice and straight. So I'm gonna set it right here on top of my intake. Actually, I'm gonna do that. I don't want to teach people how to do that and drop stuff down inside of an engine, so I'll put it back in the case just to be safe. Now here's my double check. With the guide on the plate and the plate bolted to the engine properly, I'm gonna pull this thing back down. And I gotta get past the top of the engine block, so I'm gonna give myself a little bit more room than normal. And I'm gonna go down until I hit that first thread. I'm right at 90 millimeters. Remember we were talking 89 millimeters? 89, 90 millimeters, that's my depth. I know I got my core drill right. As long as I can take this at 90 and put it on here and have this hit the drill stop and line up with the drop off. I feel comfortable that we can do this now. So let's go ahead and start our first drill. And what we're going to do, we're going to put just a little bit of WD-40 on the bit. Drop that thing down in there just like that. We're going to have our drill in forward motion. Now when you go to drill down in here, this is our first one. So when you go to drill down in here, if you ever see this, the guide tool start to come up off of the plate, it means there's too much shavings and you need to clean the shavings out. So we can go down until the stop that we installed hits the guide. And I'm going backwards and forwards. And I'm going to come out real quick before we get to the very bottom, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this hole out of, see all the shavings? See that? Okay, so I'm going to turn my vacuum on. Okay, one of the other things I'm going to do, I'm going to take a rag. I don't want this stuff blowing in my eyes. Hopefully you guys are wearing safety glasses. Watch this. Take the wand. Come on in here, Justin. I'll let you close your eyes. I'm going to put the wand down in the hole. I'm going to put the rag over top of it, and I'm going to pull the trigger. And now that cleans out the hole better, okay? And now we can reset. You'll see that it'll blow shavings everywhere. You just have to deal with it. Put the guide back down in until it's flush. Put your setup tool back on. And then when it bottoms out, you'll hear the drill speed up. Okay, and that's done. Now I put the drill in reverse. And I'm just backing it out, okay? Drop my air tool, clean off my bit. I'm going to set my bit right there, even though I told you guys not to. This is why it's so important to have an air blower. You need to get all these shavings out of here. Okay. Move my cart over here closer so we don't have to lose as much time. Okay, now that that's done, the drill's over with. I'm going to look in there with a flashlight real quick. Make sure I didn't go down past the end of the hole on the inside of the block, which you'll pretty much be able to see that you cleaned a new spot at the very bottom. And now we're going to pull our drill out. We're going to grab our tap. Take the tap, move my cart, put a little bit of WD-40 down on your tap just to lubricate the threads. Remember that black line that we made? We don't want that black line to go past that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the last portion of it by hand. And that was an 11mm square drive. I'm going to pause the video and go grab the tool to be able to do that.
Nice if I grab the right one.
Okay, so hold on. So that was me doing a cylinder from start to scratch, without start to finish, without giving you a whole lot of yak. We need to do 5 more of these for this cylinder bank to be complete. So just make sure you take your time. Don't forget to put your piston back where it needs to be. So your keyway, your Woodruff key is at 12 o'clock when you go to set your timing. Make sure that you do your cylinder head torque properly. On this one, the cylinder head is torqued to an initial stage of 22 foot-pounds in a special cross reference, which starts from the kind of the center and then kind of works its way out in an X pattern. And then it's 2 stages of 90 degrees each stage after that. And then if you're using brand new bolts, they want you to do an additional 90 degrees if they're brand new. So hopefully this helps you guys save your 3.0s and you can get them fixed. The kit for this, be prepared. It's brand new. It's in the $500 range. But the Timesert kit really out there is the one that I use for this. It's pretty self-explanatory and easy to do. Just takes a little setting up. Once you get everything set up, it's pretty easy to get done. Just make sure to blow your shavings out. Go through the video over and over again because it's quite a lengthy video, and hopefully this helps you out. I'm going to put a link to some of the tools I use and the parts kits and everything underneath the video. For those of you on the computer or cell phones, you should be able to drop down the description box, and I should have a link to that. I'm going to also have a link to a donation page if you felt that this helped you out, and you feel free to donate any amount that you want. I appreciate it. Every little bit helps because this is very time consuming to do. And then like and subscribe, and hopefully we'll see you on the next video. And I want to thank you for taking the time to go through this with me. Let's get this engine up and running and have a happy customer. Thank you. Sorry about that, had a little bit of an interruption. So I'm still where I was on the last step, but what I want to do right now is I want to blow this hole out again because we've added more shavings by doing the tapping. So once again, I'm going to take my air blower and my rag. And I'm going to clean that hole out really good. Now all I'm doing is looking down in here and see how we look. It's going to be hard for the camera to see, but you'll be able to see it with your eyeballs. Okay, so now at this point, this is where we're going to install the actual insert. So you're going to take your Timesert driver oil, and you're just going to coat the threads liberally. You want to make sure that this thing's got oil on it. They give you enough oil to do all your inserts for sure the first time out. I don't recommend you using it sparingly because this tool right here, like I said, will jam up. So what we're going to do now is we're going to find our thread lock, which you can use the thread lock in your kit. And I'm just going to lay some thread lock down on here so that this thing's got some bite. Okay. Once we get the thread lock on there, we're going to take this, we're going to put it down inside this hole, and we're going to start screwing this insert in. Now what's going to happen is the insert's going to eventually come to a stop. That's not where we want to stop. We want this, actually, you know what? I'm not going to reshoot the video for this. Go ahead and put your spacer back on because we do need to use the depth line that we put on this tool to tell us how far in that insert tool goes. I'm doing this one by hand and not with the drill, only because I've had problems with this thing breaking before, and I think it was because I was using an air tool. Okay. that's starting to get a little stiff on me, and I am just kind of pushing it through. Just kind of putting a little bit of tension on it, and then I'm looking at my black mark, which is now pretty much perfectly aligned, and that's where it came to a stop. So now we should be able to unscrew this, and if all goes well, the insert should stay inside the engine. Insert is gone. It's inside the engine. Now I'm going to clean the threads off on this, because it looked like there was a little bit of thread locker that got onto it, and I don't want thread locker on it. So I cleaned my tool off. Everything looks good, nothing bound up. Put that in my kit. I'm gonna grab a flashlight. I'm gonna check my depth, my cylinder. I keep saying cylinder, but I'm referring to the cylinder that we just bored out, not the cylinder the piston goes in. Kind of the well, looking at the threads. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put my guide back up here on the shelf. I'm gonna grab a cylinder head bolt that I know is not stripped or cross-threaded or not damaged, and I'm just gonna do a test install just to see whether or not this thing goes in nice and smooth. Look at that. Now we got solid steel threads in the engine block, and the threads are no longer damaged. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do one more hole on camera, and then you're on your own at this point, because all the others are the same except for the one that we have to change the depth on. Now here's the key. You're gonna do the depth the same, you're gonna test for the depth the same on that hole that you did on the other 7. You just have to change where you mark it. So everything else is gonna be the same. That's going to be the next hole that I'm gonna try to help you with, so that I'll give you the numbers for the 03 Honda Accord that I'm doing right now, which is a 3.0 V6. And like I said, make sure you check it with your tape, because your engine may be a little bit different. We need to make sure we get perfection. So the next step for me to do the next hole is I'm going to unbolt my plate. And I'm going to look at the threads that on the bolts that come out. That little piece of aluminum is actually from a shaving, making sure it didn't pull any threads out of the block. You can only do one insert if you only have one bolt pulled out. My recommendation is do all of them on the same bank, because when you go to torque your cylinder head bolts back down, you're going to be doing a lot of stress on the threads, and the last thing you want to feel is having the last or second to last head bolt, when you go to do your torque sequence, start to break loose and spin like it didn't catch, and then you got to pull the head back off and redo this whole process. So just do every hole on the same bank every time you do one of these. It'll really save you a lot of trouble. So let's go ahead and do the measurement on this again. Make sure you blow all your shavings off all the time. You want to be careful hitting the tape with compressed air, because it'll definitely peel that stuff back. But you want to make sure that you do these in sequence, and remember which one you did. You don't want to have to go back in and try drilling into one you just put a steel insert in, because that just kind of makes everything embarrassing at that point. So without rambling, let's go ahead and move on to the next step, which is going to be changing our drill for the short step. We're going to go back to that right now, which is this hole right here. It felt like it caught on something, but it wasn't the threads. So it stopped right there. We are at 42 millimeters. I'm going to do another one on the top. We're at 42 millimeters on the dot, so I'm going to go right at with 42. Wait, sorry, that might have been 40. Let me double check, triple check. Let's make sure we get it right. Now see, that one went in too far. I missed the threads. That's why it's important to keep doing this over and over again. Make sure you get it right. See, what's happening is I'm angling and I'm missing the threads. We're actually right at 40 millimeters. So I'm going to go at 40. And remember, we got to add 38 millimeters for the guide tool, right? So I could probably do this in my head, but let's clear it out. We'll go 42 millimeters plus 38 millimeters is 80 millimeters, right? So 80 millimeters my Sharpie back in my pocket. That's a habit for me, by the way. So I'm gonna write 80 down here just so that I know what this mark is. Okay, so that's 80 millimeters. So what we'll do on this hole is we'll take our 1/8 inch Allen. We're gonna break this little set screw loose, and we will bring the collar down until it's right at the black mark on the 80 millimeter mark. Double check, triple check, all the checks. 80 millimeters, right on the money. Take our plate, our guide, our pin, and our 2 screws, 2 bolts, rather. I'm going to go ahead and put some WD-40 on my bolts right there. I'm also going to flip my phone over so nobody has to see my screen. Sorry about that. Now remember, we have only the round hole is the one we're going to use for the guide. I want to blow off all the shavings. Now I know that I'm not going to be able to do that to get to that hole. So I have to figure out how this thing would flip to do it. Line this thing up, and when that hole, when the dowel fits down in there, as long as I can see these 3 holes stick through, I know I'm good to be able to tighten them down. Look at that. Every hole's messed up on this. It keeps pulling threads. So I'm going to end up doing the same thing on this side I did to the other side. I'm going to have to tighten down the lower bolts and not the upper one, which is not what I want to do, but I don't have a choice. Okay, I'm going to tap that down in there. Basically what you're doing right now is this is a guide plate. It's kind of a jig, and you're just tightening it down so it's flat with the block and the hole is lined up. Okay? And one of the other things, if you have that little tool, is you could put this on here and do that. Pull the pin out, put your pin back in your kit. Don't lose this. It's easier just to put the stuff back in the kit when you're not using it, so it's always where you need it. Now, double check, triple check, right? We've been working on that as a way to figure this out. I know this is redundant, but we want to make sure we want to get this right. So I am going to put this back in the hole, and I'm going to run it down until it touches that first thread, and then I'm going to check. And I'm at 82 millimeters, and that's what we were looking for, correct? 82 millimeters. So I know that I'm at the right depth. We have this set at 80. I'm going to do one more check just to make sure, because I thought we were at 82. We had it at 80. Like I said, a millimeter or two is not catastrophic. Oh, I'm sorry, I read it wrong. It's at 80. So we've set it at 80, we're at 80. See, we're working together. A few minutes lost on camera, but you know what? We double checked. We made sure that it was right. So we're golden. So now we're gonna go ahead and start drilling this hole. This is the short hole. Go in a little, come out a little, go in a little. It'll bite and then let go. See how it's coming up off the plate down there? That means that the hole's full. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna go ahead and pull this bit out. One of the things that you guys did not see me do is put a little bit of WD-40 on the drill bit. That was a mistake on my part. Luckily, it's not a catastrophic mistake. You can always correct it by doing it right now. Sometimes it feels like it doesn't want to bite. Give it a little bit of pressure, and then sometimes it will. I'm going to go ahead and pull this back out and blow this hole out because it's probably got too much. Yep. It's got too much stuff in it. So we're going to go back to cleaning out this hole with a rag, like we've been doing. Zip tie got caught in there. So if you're trying to drill and you just can't get it to go down in further, it's probably because there's so much aluminum at the bottom of the hole that the drill's just kind of stuck on them. See that? That's all it was. Clean the hole out and it went right down in. All right. So now we're going to clean our drill bit off. Clean our spacer off, put our drill bit back in here, and clean out our hole. I know that's loud, sorry about that on the microphone. And now we're going to switch over and we're going to re-tap this. We're almost done. You guys are almost ready to just keep going on your own. The reason why I keep putting WD-40, you can use grease, but grease is a little bit harder to, you know, clean out of the hole. It's easier just to use this because most of it will blow out with the air gun. Go down in a little bit, back it up. Okay, when I get close, I'm going to switch over to the manual tool again, okay? I'm doing this so that I don't use the electric to snap this thing off in the hole if it comes to a dead stop. Now, one of the things we didn't do, I love it when I mess up on a video, although good thing it's not catastrophic. We forgot to measure the 80mm depth on the tap. Luckily, this is the one step you can actually make a little bit of mistake on, as long as you don't break the tap off in the block. So we're going to go back to that step and blow the threads off real quick. We're going to go back to that step where we took the core drill and we marked it. So we need to mark it for the 80mm, and then I'll run this back down in there real quick just to make sure that I get it started by hand so that I don't mess up my threads. Sometimes when you reinstall a tap in a hole you just did, it'll very possible it can cross thread. So where it comes to a bite is right there. And that's the, I guess I'm so used to doing these, I don't worry about doing the second checks all the time. I'm trying to help you folks do this at home if you choose to do this. The mechanic. Put this back in the kit. Clean that up, put that back in the kit. And then I'm going to take my rag, clean all these shavings out. Everything's nice and clean down in there. Going to grab another insert. Going to put it on top of the tool, but we're going to make sure we're going to use our special oil. Get that on there. You know what? Real quick, I know what to do, but let's go ahead and set the depth on this one also, just so that we do it right. So we'll set that 80mm depth. Put our guide back in here. I'm going to put my thread locker on here. The reason I go across and not that way is when it's up and down, it will distribute. As you tighten it into the block, it'll just distribute evenly as it goes in. So we're going to run this thing down in there. On this one, I'm going to go ahead and run it in. And then when it comes to a stop, remember, this is where you gotta, it almost feels like it's cross-threading, and what we're doing right now is we're setting it into the block. So we're gonna run it down until that first mark. And you'll feel it seat. There it goes. Right there. Put the electric on it. No insert. If you have an insert on this, when you pull it back out, you got to start over again. Blow all that off. tool in there. And then I'm going to once again test and make sure that I got a clean set of threads. Nice. I can screw it all the way down in by hand and all the way back out. So at this point right now, there are 8 total holes to do. We've done 2 together, the short hole and 1 long hole. Now I'm going to readjust my tool and I'm going to do the remaining 6 holes. They're all the same depth. I will verify that each and every time like I normally do. But this is how you do it. There's no need for us to spend another hour videotaping me doing the remainders. You should be able to rewind and do it. I will let you guys watch me do 1 more hole. I'm not going to talk through doing it step by step. I'm just going to show you the process that I do. And then I will end the video with the talking I'll do and explain some stuff to you. And then that's it. Hopefully this helps you guys be able to do this and not destroy or throw away an engine block over something that really shouldn't happen, but it does, and unfortunately this is the way you fix it. So I'm going to go ahead and do 1 more, and I'm just going to pick one.